In the previous episode, I started building a tiny desk for my sister from some old walnut I found in our family's village, and now I'm going to finish it up. Welcome to the Gehenstory Studio. I'm Chris, and this is my first time using resin on a wood project after 12 years of playing with wood. Some things disappointed me, mainly because I had high expectations about the finishing process and the final look, but more on that later. Alright, let's pick it up where we left it. The resin was left to cure for about 3 weeks, so it was completely hardened and ready to be demolded. I feared the construction adhesive I used would be too strong, but it worked fine. It wasn't too difficult to snap the sides of the mold. On the underside, there were a few spots where the resin didn't get to, so I cleaned the surface to remove any leftover mold release with isopropyl alcohol and mixed a little bit of resin to pour in those holes. This time I utilized a different resin with a higher viscosity that doesn't take as long to cure. I really didn't want to wait a week or two to continue the project. This one says it is fully cured in 48 hours. I mixed it at the proper ratio and added a tiny bit of black dye, just like I did with a large pour. After pouring, I shook the table a few times and heat the resin with a blowtorch to force it to release the air bubbles. 2 days later, I scraped the excess with a hand plane so it could sit flat on the table. To flatten both the top and bottom surfaces, I used the CNC as it seemed quicker than setting up the flattening jig now that the workpiece is smaller. It was also good to try something different and put the CNC to use, which I haven't done in a while. I applied double-sided tape and pressed it firmly against the table. I ran a simple program asking the machine to basically recess a rectangle with a large router bit. You can see the panic face I make every time I start the CNC after not using it for some months. I'm always a bit afraid of programming something wrong, and this time was especially critical because I spent quite a lot of time working on that top. It created a bit of a mess despite having the dust collection hooked. That's how things work when using large router bits. This one was 35mm in diameter. I had a few lower spots in the resin, so I ran the program again, lowering the bit 1mm more to get a leveled surface. With that face completely flat, I could turn it around and repeat the procedure. Unfortunately, air bubbles trapped inside the resin got exposed with the flattening, and this area was particularly bad. I got black CA glue that I heard is great for these repairs in the black resin, so I filled all those tiny pockets and let it air dry. I was afraid that using the activator would create whitish marks, so I didn't use it. For other tiny holes around brown areas, I just used regular transparent CA glue. I sanded the whole surface with various grits starting at 80. This is my first time using resin on a wood project, so I had high expectations from what other people do on YouTube and in digital workshops. So I hope that CA glue could save the day, but that wasn't the case, at least for the black one. It didn't properly cure after one day or effectively fill the micro holes, so I had to scrape that flexible crap and try something else. I removed what I could and tried the clear CA glue instead. I've read in forums that it becomes nearly invisible over the black resin. I paused on that and cut the tabletop to its final dimensions. I made the cuts using the track saw because it's easy to make the first straight cut and it collects the dust much better than my table saw. Also, I didn't want epoxy dust all over the studio. Before setting the large faces to the final grit, which was 180, I grabbed the edge sander to take care of those blade marks. I noticed lots of swirl marks left by the 180 grit paper, so I tried to remove those by hand, sanding just over the resin parts. After sanding the faces to 180 as per the maximum grit recommended by the finish manufacturer, I cleaned the surface with a raw wood cleaner to remove all the dust. I still wasn't satisfied with the problematic bubbly part of the table, so I tried one last thing. I purposely enlarged the bubble areas with a gouge, removed all the CA glue, and poured more epoxy with a little bit of black dye mixed in. I forced it into the holes with a toothpick and waited another 48 hours. I removed most of the excess with a sharp chisel and sanded the area, again with 180 grit. The filling was still visible, and this was the closest I could get to acceptable. I must point out that if I had more time to work on this, I would have scraped a thick layer of that entire area and refilled it with new epoxy. It just seemed impossible to get flawless results using any fixing method. As a first epoxy table resin experience, I found it extremely difficult to achieve a perfect result. I'm not saying that people can get excellent results, but this made me suspect most content I see online. Well, I moved on and applied the hard wax oil, ensuring the wood absorbed as much finish as it wanted. The bubble section also happened partially because I poured the resin into the large hole when it had a considerable tunnel facing the base of the mold. This meant I couldn't reach and brush this section where the bubbles formed when I was spreading the epoxy to release the air bubbles. Having holes in the slabs from both sides can make it quite tricky, so I will avoid this if I decide to do another resin slab project sometime. But still, I was hoping that a perfect bubble fixing would be easier, or even possible. After 24 hours, I scuffed the surface with a black pad and applied a second coat. It brought a lot more sheen and depth to the wood and made the black areas more shiny, which to me was a disadvantage. So the second part of my deception was that every single swirl mark from the 180 grid was visible in the final table. I don't understand what people do about this. Do you sand just the epoxy to a much higher grit or don't care about the looks? It was pretty disappointing to see all those marks at the end. Okay, so the tabletop is done and I can now focus on making the drawer pull for the shallow drawer that will live under the desk. My sister and I found a cool idea on Pinterest that we wanted to replicate. It consists of recessing a large hole in the center of the drawer front and then embedding a horizontal strip as a grabbing point. I could have used the CNC to cut this in 5 minutes, but I went the good old route and used the drill press and router table. I initiated the hole and then went to the router table to cut the horizontal line. I placed 2 stop blocks on the fence to keep lateral alignment between passes. After the first pass, I could see the line wasn't entirely centered, so I corrected the placement for one of the stop blocks to allow the cut to go further in the opposite direction. It's good to go, so let's raise the bit until full depth is achieved. I didn't drill the large hole all the way through at the beginning because I was afraid to lose grip on the piece when it left and entered the material. It just seemed safer to keep most of the material intact. With the original walls recessed, I could realign the Forstner bit perfectly and finish drilling. I painted the interior edge with the same yellow paint to match the rest of the desk and bookshelf. I sanded between the coats to see if I could disguise the plywood layer texture. I cleaned a walnut cutoff on the table saw for the horizontal pull. At first I was going for the area with the black resin, but I saw this other section with a lot of figure that looked more interesting. I rounded the corners until it fit inside the groove. After masking the ends, I applied more of the same finish. The next day, I could remove the masking tape and glue the pull to the drawer front. Here's the top and the drawer ready to be installed at my sister's. I used these expansion brackets to allow the wood to move with the seasons. I aligned it the best I could with the base, but honestly, I know it won't be in the same place in a few months from now. I should have made the top a few millimeters bigger in each direction to disguise future misalignment. Well, another lesson for next time. Here I was trying to fit the drawer in the slides, but the drawer box was hitting the screw heads on the brackets I just installed.
Oh no.
So I had to go back to my studio, shave the height of the box a little, and come back. To attach the drawer front, I applied double-sided tape so I could open it, clamp it, and screw it from behind. Here it is, a tiny desk and custom-made bookshelf to fit the small corner in my sister's apartment. She's pretty happy now that she has more storage and a place to work, even if it's very compact. Now it's time to get your hands dirty. Até já!